बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं देता हूं।
Hello and welcome. I'm Asima Katauk and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. US President Donald Trump has threatened to substantially raise tariffs on India over its purchases and alleged reselling of Russian oil. India has slammed the move as unjustified and unreasonable, stating the US had previously encouraged such imports. Russia launched air attack on the Ukrainian town of Lozova in Kharkiv region, injuring several people, including 2 children, according to local official Serhiy Zelensky. In this overnight strike, critical infrastructure, homes, and apartment buildings were damaged, according to Ukrainian officials. China insists it has the final say in choosing the next Dalai Lama, rejecting the Nobel laureate's assertion that his reincarnation will be determined by his own institution and likely outside China. Gama Sidain, Deputy Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party Committee in Tibet, said that the central government will use a domestic search and approval process. Brazil's Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes ordered former President Jair Bolsonaro under house arrest in Brasilia on Monday for violating social media ban during his trial for allegedly plotting a coup. Bolsonaro, who ruled from 2019 to 2022, is now barred from receiving visitors except lawyers and using mobile phones, with police seizing several devices from his home. Colombian court has rejected former President Alvaro Uribe's request for temporary freedom, while he appeals his 12-year house arrest sentence. The 73-year-old, convicted of witness tampering and obstructing justice, is the first formal leader of Colombia to be criminally sentenced. The Israeli military has said a projectile which has been fired from Yemen was intercepted after air raid sirens sounded across Israel. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced he will brief the army on an updated plan for the war in Gaza. Bangladesh marks 1 year since former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina fled to India on August 5, 2024, amid deadly student-led protests that killed hundreds and injured thousands. The country of 173 million is now governed by an interim administration led by 85-year-old Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus, who has struggled to deliver promised electoral and institutional reforms. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa called the 30% U.S. tariffs on South African exports very punitive and warned they could threaten up to 100,000 jobs. He said South Africa would seek to limit the impact while engaging Washington to normalize trade relations and diversify export markets. China says not the Dalai Lama will choose his successor. A Chinese Communist Party official stated that the discovery of the next Dalai Lama will be carried out by the central government, not under the current Dalai Lama's direction. Gama Sidain, the Deputy Secretary of the Party Committee in Tibet, told reporters that the government has the final say in the reincarnation process, which he claimed will follow historical and religious customs. The Dalai Lama, however, has previously said his reincarnation will be born outside China and denied Beijing any role in selecting his successor. China considers the Nobel laureate a separatist and has long sought to exert control over Tibetan Buddhism. Now we are joined by Andrew K.P. Long. He's a China strategist, joins us live from London. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, looking at this news, what potential consequences could this disagreement have on China's international image and its relations with countries like India, where Tibetan refugees are very prominent?
Well, of course, this is a very complicated and historical, a lot of historical background. If you look at the succession of the Dalai Lama through the past couple of centuries, dating back to the Qing dynasty. Under the Qianlong emperor, the Dalai Lama succession was, of course, approved by the Qing government, following a tradition involving the drawing of lots in a golden urn, URN, drawing lots from a golden urn. Of course, there is a role played by the Panchen Lama, the second leader. So these are traditions have been going on for quite a long time, dating back, as I said, to the Qing dynasty, to the Emperor Qianlong. And of course, that there are a number of, because of historical circumstances, there are a number of departures where this tradition was not followed. And then the current Dalai Lama, of course, resulted in the separation, exile to India. And there was a great deal of conflict between those who follow the current Dalai Lama and the Chinese government's position. Now, it is a fact that quite a number of succession cases in the past follow the tradition of selection through the golden urn, and the Beijing government has codified this in Chinese law. And because of the separatist sentiments of the current Dalai Lama, Beijing, of course, doesn't recognize the current declaration by the current Dalai Lama, wanting to centralize all the decisions in himself, in his trust. Now, of course, the Tibet is a very, very important province for China. It's a huge territory, lots of natural resources, and of course, it's a cause of conflict with India, because the original territory of Tibet was separated, was a big part of it in the southern Tibet was a hive off by British India. British India at the time invaded that part of Tibet, but this separation of that part of Tibet has never been recognized by China, even before the founding of the People's Republic of China. And of course now it's never recognized that that part belonged to India in the first place, and hence these border disputes and so on. So this is very complicated, and mixed with the separation of the separatist sentiment of the current Dalai Lama, it is a hot potato. Now, another dimension, of course, if you look at history, Tibet always, it is quite a difficult terrain, but even through the centuries, it was under China's control in one form or another. They always pay homage to the Chinese government. Another dimension is, of course, throughout history, the personal freedom of the Tibetan people is also subsumed under the religion, in the sense that all Tibetans were regarded as simple chattels of the Dalai Lama. They have got no rights to their personal body or their own property. Everything belonged to the Dalai Lama. But after the People's Republic, the founding People's Republic, then the personal rights and freedoms of all Tibetans were completely changed. And of course, that the conflict also infringes on the Tibetan religion in terms of their homage to the Dalai Lama. But of course, there is no doubt that the lives of the Tibetan people have been completely changed for the better, in terms of life expectancy, in terms of possession of their own properties, their personal personal freedom as a person. So I think that there are a number of conflicts on that count as well. Now, the current event is particularly important because as I said, the separatist sentiments of the current Dalai Lama and the different interpretation of how the succession should be conducted. But the fact remains that the succession has already been codified by Chinese law and is still wanting the reversion of the succession to the age-old selection process involving the selection through the golden urn and the role played by the current Panchen Lama. Now, as far as the Panchen Lama is concerned, again, there is a dispute as to his incarnation. There's a difference in view vis-a-vis the status of the current Panchen Lama. That further complicates the issue.
Yes. Andrew K.P. Long, thank you very much for always joining us and sharing your insight as a China strategist, joined us live from London. Now we move on to our next news. The Netherlands has become the first NATO member to contribute to a new funding mechanism to arm Ukraine with U.S. weapons. Dutch Defense Minister Ruben Brekelmans confirmed a €500 million package, around $579 million, will be used to purchase U.S. military equipment, including Patriot missiles. The contribution marks the first step under NATO's Priority Ukraine Requirements List, or PURL, an initiative unveiled by President Donald Trump last month. President Trump said U.S. weapons would be provided to Ukraine but paid for by European allies. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, a former Dutch Prime Minister, praised the move and urged other allies to follow. Rutte has personally written to NATO members to join the burden-sharing plan. U.S. Ambassador to NATO Matthew Whitaker also told that several countries are preparing to join in the coming weeks. Let's listen to U.S. Ambassador to NATO Matthew Whitaker, what he had to say.
The Dutch are just the first of many. You're going to see a series of announcements in the coming weeks. You know, when we announced this facility that allowed our NATO allies to buy U.S. equipment and provide that to Ukraine for their defense, you know, we had a lot of our allies raise their hand and line up. A lot of them are coming together in groups to pool their money and their resources together to provide these armaments and munitions. And so, you know, it's the whole purpose of NATO and what makes this alliance the strongest is this platform we have to communicate amongst allies and to really talk about these issues and come up with solutions.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked the Dutch, saying their support will help protect Europe from Russian terror. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Glenn Grant. He's an ex-advisor to Ukrainian Defense Minister, joining us from Latvia. Thank you for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, can you tell us? Nice to be here. Thank you. Now, can you tell us how significant is this Netherlands' contribution to NATO's new funding mechanism to support Ukraine?
Well, it's not a surprise that the Netherlands is first, because you will remember that you know at the beginning of the war they had a plane shot down and many Dutch people were killed, and the Netherlands still has not sort of solved that with Russia. So they have a direct reason for wanting to support Ukraine and against the Russian the Russian actions. Other countries will follow, as you heard, and some of the delay is because some of the things that are going to be purchased, it's not exactly clear how much they'll cost, when they can be delivered, and in what numbers they can be delivered. So you're going to see a bit of a delay with some things. Now this is nothing bad. This is just the fact that you know, the bureaucracy of buying weapons from America and then supplying them to Ukraine is not a simple issue. So it's not going to happen overnight. Other countries will come in over the coming weeks.
And Glenn, now looking at this move by Netherlands, how sustainable is this funding model for NATO in the long term, especially for smaller European members?
Well, I mean, that depends on priorities, doesn't it? I mean, I mean, Europe's got a lot of money. Let's be blunt about it. I mean, you put all the countries in Europe together, and collectively they can afford a huge amount. The question is, of course, is how much enthusiasm there will be for providing hard cash from places like Spain and Italy, and I think that will be less. And of course, those countries are large and they've got money. So you might find that actually this model flounders a bit because not all the NATO countries will actually give as much as it's possible to give, and there are one or two of them that, of course, still need to spend a lot of money on their own defence, like Germany, Finland, countries that can't actually defend themselves properly yet. So I think sustainability is a big question. You're right to ask it. And right at this moment, I don't have a clear answer of how much enthusiasm there'll be.
Thank you very much, Glenn Grant, for joining us today and sharing your insight all the way from Latvia. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. According to new reports, Russia says a Ukrainian drone strike overnight triggered multiple fires in the southern Rostov region. A power substation caught fire, but officials confirmed no injuries. Russia's defense ministry claims its forces shot down 24 drones, including seven over Rostov. The region has been regular target of Ukrainian drone attacks. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, according to reports, a Russian airstrike on the town of Lozova in the Kharkiv region. Local officials say 2 children were injured and several homes, apartments, and critical infrastructure were damaged. These strikes come as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky releases a strong message on social media. He says Russia is prolonging the war because it has the money to do so. Zelensky calls for more sanctions, weapons, and international political pressure to force Russia towards peace. He also thanked President Donald Trump for showing determination to end the war, saying new sanctions and growing pressure are already having an impact inside of Russia. Now for this discussion, we're joined by retired Major General Sudhakarji. He's a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert. Thank you, Sudhakarji, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, what's your reaction towards this news?
Subha, good morning. Thank you for getting me to your show. As regards the question and the preamble which you have just shared, unfortunately, the reality is something different. It is not being understood by the Western Alliance. And if at all Putin invaded Ukraine back in 2022, 24th of February, then the fundamental reason must be understood as to why did he invade. So if that is not understood, then perhaps we may continue putting pressure and imposing sanctions. And as far as sanctions are concerned, there are more than 16,000 sanctions imposed on Russia as of today. And at places I have been reading that there are about 30,000 sanctions imposed on Russia for past several years from 2014 till date. So sanctions won't actually give us a lasting solution. As regards the use of the drones on the infrastructure in the hinterland of Russia, well, that may be the objective and one of the aims of Ukrainian forces. Application of the Ukraine resources, warlike resources in deep hinterland infrastructure projects of Russia, as far as Zelensky is concerned, it may be understood as you are attacking and decimating the war effort of Russia, but unfortunately it is not so. These are all activities which are providing essential trigger to prolong the war. The bigger cause and the reason of Russo-Ukraine war is the expansion of the NATO sphere of influence, as against what was committed on 9th of February 1990 by James Baker, the Secretary of State of USA, to Mikhail Gorbachev in Moscow. So as against that commitment, the Western alliances or the NATO forces have continued expanding the sphere of influence. If there is no solution to this and the fundamental demands of Russia, I don't think any amount of pressure, any sanction on any country, including India, is not going to bring about ceasefire that we are contemplating. Back to Asu.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, retired Major General Sudhakarji, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we move on to North America. The U.S. Department of Justice has launched a grand jury investigation into allegations that officials from former President Barack Obama's administration manipulated intelligence related to Russian interference in the 2016 election. The probe follows claims by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who accused the Obama administration of weaponizing the intelligence community to undermine then-candidate Donald Trump. President Trump has described these allegations as vindication, while Obama's spokesperson dismissed the claims as baseless political attacks. The original 2017 intelligence assessment concluded that Russia sought to damage Hillary Clinton's campaign and support Trump, but found no evidence that these efforts changed the election outcome. The Justice Department is now reviewing evidence, and the grand jury could consider indictments based on its findings. Now we go back to our guest discussion with retired Major General Sudhakarji. Thank you, Major General Sudhakarji, for staying with us. Now, looking at this news with the Justice Department launching a grand jury investigation back to 2016's election interference claims, how do you assess the political motivations behind these allegations from both sides?
Asubha, you have nailed it in your question. I personally feel, as a student of geopolitics and strategy and security, global strategy, it's politically motivated, and otherwise an issue which had happened sometime in 2016, basically alleging support of Russian agencies with regard to misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, so that the election campaigning could have a positive outcome. Technically, I am given to understand from the open sources that there was very little impact or no impact at all on the outcome of the elections of Donald Trump. So I take it that this is a kind of a divide between the Democrats and the Republic inside the USA, and particularly Donald Trump. At that point in time, this had become a major issue that Russian involvement and interference in US elections was rampant. And it was suspected that the victory of Donald Trump was purely because of invisible support and hidden support of a Russian agency. But somehow there is no evidence, and Russia has unanimously, I would say, consistently has been denying any kind of involvement in such kind of elections. Second point I wish to highlight is, why should Donald Trump, in Trump 2.0, when he has already set out the agenda as far as the MAGA is the basic aim and objective of his campaign and his presidency 2.0, why should such kind of baggages be opened? They unnecessarily pollute the environment, dilute the effort, which is in any case, tariff is not giving any kind of credible and visible progressive development in favor of America till date. Each one, whichever country has agreed, they have agreed just on verbal purpose. I don't think anyone has ratified that in their present system of governance, be it in the democracy or otherwise. So here is a new issue which is being cooked up, perhaps, or being brought into the open domain so that it could be used as a front to divert the attention. This is what I understand. It's politically motivated, doesn't have any meaningful, substantive issue which will contribute towards establishing a kind of transparent and equitable and rules-based administrative milestone as far as America is concerned during Donald Trump 2.0. It will be waste of time, it will be waste of resources, and also it will distract the current focus of USA to become America again, first again, and also channelize its effort and energy in that direction. Back to you, Asu.
Thank you very much, Retired Major General Sudhakarji, for joining us today. Always nice hearing from you. Now we move on to our next news. The UK is set to implement a new migrant return deal with France within days, following the ratification of a treaty today. The agreement, announced last month by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron, is aimed at curbing illegal migration. Under the one-in, one-out scheme, France will accept migrants arriving in Britain via small boats, while the UK will take in an equal number of legitimate asylum seekers with family ties to Britain. The deal, signed last week but not officially announced until now, has been approved by the European Commission and EU member states. Britain's Interior Ministry expects migrant detentions to begin soon. The government plans to return about 50 migrants a week, though the scheme could expand. However, the European Commission has expressed concerns, emphasizing that it will assess the practical details of this agreement, given the rising number of migrants smuggled across this channel. Now we're joined by Keith Vaz. He's a former UK minister, joins us live from London. Thank you, Keith, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, how does this UK-France migrant return deal align with the UK's broader immigration strategy?
Good morning, Asma from London. We don't know. This is a pilot. This is an agreement that was made by President Macron and our Prime Minister Keir Starmer when he came on his state visit a couple of weeks ago. The scheme sounds like a good idea. If somebody comes in here illegally, you return them to France, and then you take from France someone who has been properly processed and found to be a legitimate asylum seeker. So in principle, it sounds like a good idea, but in practice, you're not actually reducing the number of people coming to the UK. What you are just doing is finding a new pathway to allow people to come and settle in the UK. So it doesn't deal with the fundamental concerns of public opinion, which is that too many people are immigrating to the UK without the consent of the British authorities. And if you look at the figures, Asma, 25,000 people have come on small boats into the United Kingdom since the start of this year. Since the election of this new government, 50,000 people have jumped on a boat in France, traveled across the English Channel, arrived in the UK, and have been allowed to live here.
Keith, I would also like, do you think this deal could encourage other European nations to adopt similar arrangement, even though this challenges or this does not solve the fundamental problem?
No, it doesn't solve the fundamental problem. You're quite right, Asma. The fundamental problem is, where do these migrants come from and why are they coming? And the fundamental problem is the source countries. You have to engage directly with the source countries to find out why they are allowing people to leave and why there is safe passage by people traffickers, which enables them to come all the way from North Africa or other countries, far, far away lands, and end up in the United Kingdom. So although I wasn't a fan of the Rwanda scheme, at least that sounded like a deterrent. This, unfortunately, does not sound like a deterrent. So although it's a pilot, which we should welcome and we should test out, I think at the end of the day, it's not going to reduce the numbers of migrants coming to the UK, which is the ultimate aim of our immigration policy. So we'll have to wait and see how effective it is. And we go back to what I said earlier. The best way to tackle this is to do a deal with the source countries, because that is where people are coming from. And I don't think the government quite understands that that's the way to deal with the problem of this type of illegal migration. The French are not doing very much. They've received £500 million 2 years ago when the previous government signed a deal on migration. What have they done for this money? I remember when I chaired the Home Affairs Committee, we went over to the border and we found out that the French gendarmes left at 5 o'clock to go home. So after 5 o'clock in the evening, any person can jump on any vehicle and come to the UK illegally. I mean, there is water between Britain and France. So strictly speaking, you should be able to know when the boats are setting off from France. Certainly, if somebody was trying to invade France, France would know, and they would send out their forces to stop them. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt. It's a new scheme, announced today. Let's see if it works. Come back in, say, 2 months to see whether or not it actually has worked.
Yes, indeed. We'll be following up with this news, and always nice hearing from you. Thank you very much for joining us today, Keith Vaz. He's a former UK minister. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.